London, 1842. Rain tapped against the glass of the Harrington auction hall like impatient fingers, each drop carrying away a fragment of who Isabel Carmichael used to be. 3 years ago, she had a name, a home, a future. Now, all she had was a gray dress and the fragile courage to stand among 12 other women, waiting for some stranger to decide whether she was worth a 1-year marriage contract. The mirror across the room reflected a pale, too thin face, yet her eyes remained unbroken. Eyes that refused to lower, even as the auctioneer called out prices as if selling mares at a livestock fair. It doesn't matter who buys me, she thought, tightening her cold hands. Anything is better than the streets. Anything is better than him finding me. Because Isabel wasn't there out of poverty alone. She was there because someone was hunting her, and she needed to disappear. The air smelled of polished wood, expensive tobacco, and barely hidden despair. Men whispered among themselves, evaluating the women like they were choosing curtains for a drawing room. None looked them in the eye. None cared about anything beyond appearance, the illusion of respectability that a temporary wife could provide. Isabel swallowed hard as the auctioneer approached. Her turn had come, and she had no idea that at that very moment, in the shadowed back of the smoky hall, a man with storm-gray eyes had already seen her. Not her face, but the danger that followed her. The auctioneer adjusted his spectacles and raised his voice above the murmurs. Lot 17, Miss Isabel Carmichael, 24 years of age. Literate, fluent in French and Italian, skilled in music and household management. Isabel climbed the 3 steps to the platform as if walking to the gallows. Each word was a splinter cut from her dignity, but she held her chin high. Her father had taught her that, when all is lost, hold your posture. It's the one thing no one can steal, but he had been wrong. They had stolen everything, the inheritance that should have been hers, the name that should have protected her, the safety every well-born woman deserved. And now she was here, being auctioned like cattle, while the rain outside washed the streets of London but cleansed nothing. Who will offer £1,000? Silence, a heavy, suffocating silence she knew too well, the same that filled every ballroom after the scandal, after the lies, after society turned its back on her. 800, 600. Each lowered price was a public humiliation, yet she refused to look down. And then, the back door opened. A man stepped inside, tall, dressed entirely in black, rain dripping from his cloak. He didn't look at the auctioneer. He didn't glance at the other men. He looked only at her. And Isabel felt it, not lust, not curiosity, recognition. As if he knew her, as if he understood exactly why she was there, and who she was hiding from. £40,000, the man said, his voice slicing through the room like a blade. For the 1-year contract with Miss Carmichael. The world stopped. £40,000, a fortune, a scandal. And Isabel understood with terrifying clarity that this man wasn't buying a wife. He was buying a secret, or protecting one. Before we continue this story of love and redemption, subscribe to the channel for more tales of passion, mystery, and forbidden devotion. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Your city, your country. I love to see how far these stories travel. Now, stay with me for the unforgettable story of Isabel and Damien. Chapter 1. Silence and Absence. The carriage rattled over the uneven stones of London, and Isabel kept her hands clasped tightly in her lap, fingers pressed together until they hurt. Across from her, the Duke of Wintermere sat in silence, a silence so dense it seemed to fill every corner of the compartment. She didn't look at him. Not yet. Instead, her eyes stayed fixed on the rain sliding down the glass, tracing crooked paths like veins of light against the dark. The city was fading, the dim glow of taverns, the narrow alleys, the hunched shadows of those still wandering through the night. All of it slipping away, all of it dissolving into the wet darkness. £40,000. Even inside her own head, the number sounded impossible. No one paid £40,000 for a contract wife. No one. Especially not for a woman with no family, no dowry, and nothing left but a stained name and a secret heavy as stone. Are you afraid of me? His voice broke the silence, low, deliberate, unhurried. Isabel turned toward him at last. His eyes were the same shade of winter gray she'd seen in the auction hall, cold, but not cruel. There was something else behind them. Weariness, perhaps. Or wait, should I be? She asked, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. He tilted his head slightly, the faintest trace of a smile curving his mouth. Most people are. Then most people weren't being sold like cattle an hour ago. This time, his smile was real, fleeting, but real. Sharp tongue. She looked back out the window. Her reflection stared back, pale, hollow-eyed, the hem of her gray dress damp from the rain. She looked exactly as she was, a woman on the edge of a cliff who had already jumped, praying there would be something, or someone, to catch her. Why me? She whispered. There were younger women, prettier ones. Without, she hesitated, searching for the word. Stories. He didn't answer at once. When she dared look again, he was leaning back, arms crossed, studying her the way a man studies a puzzle he already half understands. Because, he said finally, you weren't looking for a husband. You were looking for refuge. Her heart skipped. He knows. Not everything. He couldn't know everything. But enough. Enough to have gone to that auction not by chance, but by purpose. And you? She forced herself to ask, lifting her chin. What are you looking for, Your Grace? He held her gaze for a heartbeat too long, and something shifted inside her chest. Not fear, but unease of another kind. As if she stood on the edge of understanding something she wasn't ready to name. Reparation, he said at last. And perhaps, Miss Carmichael, a little peace. The carriage turned a corner, and the street lamp cast a brief glow across his face. A thin scar cutting through his left brow, faint lines at the corners of his eyes. The marks of a man who had seen too much, who had lost too much. Isabel tightened her clasped hands. She didn't understand why he had paid a fortune. Didn't understand what he knew. Didn't understand why, instead of fear, she felt something dangerously close to safety for the first time in 3 years. And that frightened her most of all. Chapter 2. The Unlikely Encounter. Damien Hargrave knew the weight of silence. He had known it on battlefields, where one wrong move could cost a life. He had known it the day he inherited a title and every heavy duty that came with it. And he had known it most of all the night he failed to protect someone who depended on him. Now, sitting across from the woman in his carriage, he measured every word before he spoke. Isabel Carmichael. He had memorized the name 3 weeks ago, when the investigator's report landed on his desk. It wasn't a name that belonged on a marriage auction list. It was a name that belonged to the polished pages of society registers, the invitations of grand houses, the guest lists of London's most respectable salons. But there had been another name in that report. A name Damien knew far too well. Lord Victor Halford. And that changed everything. He studied Isabel quietly. Her delicate profile, the defiant angle of her chin, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap, it looked as if she were holding herself together by sheer will. She was trying to appear composed, but he recognized the signs. The way she avoided his direct gaze, the deliberate shallow breaths, the tension in her shoulders, tamed fear, the kind learned by those who never had a choice. The journey to Wintermere Hall takes 5 hours, he said, breaking the silence. We'll stop at an inn along the way. It isn't safe to travel deserted roads after midnight. She nodded, though her posture stiffened. Of course she's wondering about the sleeping arrangements, he thought. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. I need you to understand something, Miss Carmichael. This contract marriage will be honored in every legal sense. You will have your own quarters at Wintermere, your own room. I will require nothing of you that isn't stated in the agreement. She blinked, uncertain. Then why? Because there are people in London who must not find you. he said carefully. And I have personal reasons to make sure they don't. He watched understanding, and then panic, dawn in her eyes. You know Lord Halford? It wasn't a question. I do, Damien replied quietly. And I know exactly what he's capable of. The clock inside the carriage ticked with sharp metallic clicks. Damien had seen soldiers break under less pressure, but Isabel only tightened her clasped hands and lifted her chin. He said he'd find me, she whispered, no matter where I went. Not while you're under my name, Damien interrupted, his voice like steel. Halford has influence, yes, but I have something he doesn't. What? A debt to pay. Her brow furrowed, but before she could ask, he continued. As for the financial terms, the auctioneer explained. She hesitated. He said the £40,000 would be mine after the year ends. Correct, Damien said. I've already paid in full. The auctioneer keeps a portion, and the rest, approximately $37,000, will remain in my solicitor's custody. On the final day of the 12th month, assuming both of us honor the contract, the sum will be transferred to your account. You'll be a woman of means, free to start over wherever you wish, where Halford can't reach you. The carriage slowed. Damien looked out the window. Warm lights glowed in the distance, the Golden Swan Inn. We've arrived. The innkeeper, a stout man with red cheeks, bowed deeply when he saw the ducal crest on the carriage. Your Grace, what an honor! I've prepared our finest room at once. Damien saw Isabel go pale beside him. Room, singular, of course. To the world they were husband and wife. To ask for separate rooms would raise questions neither of them could afford. Excellent, Damien said smoothly. Then, lowering his voice so only she could hear, trust me. The room was indeed the best in the inn. Spacious, warm, with a large canopy bed, a crackling fire, and, to Damien's relief, a well-upholstered sofa near the window. Once the door closed behind them, Isabel stepped back, wide-eyed. I'll sleep on the sofa, Damien said immediately, crossing the room and testing it with a hand. It's suitable. You'll have the bed, but we're married, she murmured, confusion flickering in her tone. Legally, they expect that I don't care what they expect. He turned to face her fully. Isabel. He used her name for the first time, and saw the faint tremor that passed through her. You have nothing to fear from me. Never. The contract is clear. This arrangement is one of protection, not obligation. She studied him for a long moment. He stayed still, letting her watch, weigh, decide. Finally, Isabel nodded. Thank you. You can change behind the screen, he said, gesturing. I'll go check on the horses. Knock when you're ready. He left the room, closing the door softly behind him. And only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. 12 months, he reminded himself. 12 months of boundaries, restraint, distance. But as he stood in the cold corridor, listening faintly to the sounds of her moving within the room, Damien wondered if distance would be enough, because he was beginning to realize something dangerous. Isabel Carmichael wasn't just a woman he needed to protect. She was a woman he needed to understand. And that, he thought grimly, was infinitely more perilous. Chapter 3: The Moral Test. Isabel woke to the soft light of morning filtering through the curtains of the inn. For a brief moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then everything returned: the auction, the Duke, the carriage ride, and the night before. When he had kept his word and slept on the sofa without hesitation. She dressed quickly behind the folding screen, listening to the faint sounds of the Duke moving about the room. When she stepped out, there was no awkwardness between them, only a polite greeting, a quiet breakfast served in a private dining room, and soon after, they were back on the road. The morning journey felt different. There was light now, and Isabel could finally see the world beyond the fog. Rolling hills, dense woods, endless stretches of open field. The farther they moved from London, the looser the knot in her chest became. Halford can't reach me here, she thought. Not while the name Hargrave shields me. Damien remained mostly silent, but it wasn't the cold kind of silence. It was thoughtful. Every now and then his eyes found hers, and he gave a slight nod, as if making sure she was still all right. And strangely, she was. After 3 hours, the carriage turned onto a long road lined with ancient oaks. And then, there it was, Wintermere Hall. The estate unfolded slowly, stone walls covered in ivy, wrought iron gates bearing the Hargrave crest, and beyond them, the mansion itself. It was imposing but not ostentatious, built of pale stone that caught the morning sun. 3 stories high, with tall, graceful windows and a grand entrance framed by columns that spoke of age and endurance. But what caught Isabel's attention most were the gardens. Or what used to be gardens, overgrown flower beds, untended rose bushes, walkways buried under fallen leaves, as if the house had been asleep for years, waiting for someone to wake it. The carriage stopped before the main steps. An elderly butler appeared at once, solemn but not unkind. The Duke stepped out first and offered his hand. Isabel hesitated only a moment before taking it. His palm was firm, calloused. When her feet touched the ground, he didn't release her hand immediately. He stood there, eyes fixed on the house, his expression unreadable. Nostalgia, perhaps? Or regret? "Welcome to Wintermere," he said at last. His tone wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was careful. Inside, the air smelled of candle wax and old wood. Wide corridors, tall ceilings, portraits of stern ancestors watching from gilded frames. A woman appeared, middle-aged, neatly dressed, posture impeccable, eyes gentle. "Mrs. Beatrice," Damien introduced. "She will see to anything you require," the housekeeper curtsied. "Your Grace, welcome to Wintermere. Your Grace." The title still didn't feel real. Damien led her down a long hallway until they reached a pair of double doors. "Your quarters," he said. Isabel stepped inside and drew a sharp breath. It wasn't a room. It was a suite, a sitting area with a lit fireplace, a bed draped in fine linen, and a small writing desk facing the neglected gardens below. Everything looked spotless, as if prepared for days. As if he had known, from the very beginning, that she would come. "There are clothes in the wardrobe," the Duke continued, remaining at the threshold as though he didn't dare step farther. "If you need anything, pull the cord beside the fireplace. Mrs. Beatrice will attend to you." Isabel turned toward him, truly looking at him for the first time in daylight. He looked tired. She could see it in the faint lines near his eyes, in the way he carried his shoulders. But there was something else, something she couldn't name, determination or guilt. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "The truth, Your Grace." He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he stepped into the room, just one step, and somehow the space between them felt both smaller and vast. "Because," he said, his voice lower now, almost raw, 3 years ago, I failed to save someone who needed me. And that failure?" He paused, the words dragging like glass. "It follows me every night." Isabel felt her chest tighten, not out of pity, but recognition. Because she knew that weight, the burden of something that could never be undone. "So I'm your redemption?" she whispered. "No." His winter gray eyes found hers, steady, unflinching. "You're my second chance." The silence that followed was different. Not uneasy, but understanding. 2 strangers, both haunted, standing at the same edge. Isabel nodded slowly. "Then don't waste it, Your Grace." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. "I don't intend to, Duchess Carmichael." He left the room, closing the door behind him with a quiet click. For a moment, Isabel simply stood there, listening to the faint crackle of the fire. Then she walked to the window. Below, the forgotten gardens stretched in silence. Wilted roses, bare soil, dormant beauty. Like me, she thought. Waiting to bloom again. And for the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to believe. Perhaps she could. Chapter 4. Involuntary trust. 3 days had passed since Isabel arrived at Wintermere Hall, and Damien was beginning to realize he hadn't bought a frightened woman. He had bought a survivor. From the study window, he watched her in the gardens, or what was left of them. She wore a light shawl, a book in her hands, her steps slow among the withered rose bushes. She had asked for permission to borrow books from the library, and he'd granted it instantly, surprised that she had even asked. Most wouldn't have. Most would assume the right. But not Isabel Carmichael, she asked. She thanked. She kept to her own wing of the house as if afraid to take up too much space, and that, Damien found, unsettled him more than it should. He watched her pause before a dying rose, fingers brushing a fallen bloom. She didn't pick it up, only looked at it, as though seeing something he couldn't. Then she sat on a stone bench and opened her book, losing herself in its pages. Damien turned away from the window. It wasn't his place to watch her. His duty was to protect her, and watching every move she made was not protection. It was something else. Something he couldn't name. Something he shouldn't allow. 2 hours later, a knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in," Mrs. Beatrice entered, precise and composed as always. "Your Grace, Miss Carmichael asked me to thank you for the clothes. She said they're far too fine and didn't want to accept them without—" "Tell her she doesn't need to thank me," Damien interrupted, turning back to his desk. "Everything is according to the contract. With respect." "Your Grace," the housekeeper said gently, and there was something almost maternal in her tone. "The young lady isn't behaving according to the contract. She's behaving like an unwanted guest. Perhaps if you spoke to her." Damien looked up. "And say what? That she has the right to be here? That she doesn't need to hide?" "Hide!" The word hit him like a blow, because that was exactly what Isabel was doing. Not out of fear of him, but out of habit. Out of a survival instinct learned the hardest way. He exhaled slowly. "Where is she now?" "In the library, sir." "By the fire?" He found her there, just as Beatrice had said. Sitting by the hearth, the book open in her lap, her gaze fixed on the flames. She didn't hear him enter. She looked lost in thoughts heavier than the book she held. "Do you like poetry?" he asked. She startled, turning quickly, clutching the book to her chest. "Your Grace, I didn't know you used the library at this hour." "I don't," Damien said, stepping closer. "But you may." "At any hour," she nodded but didn't relax. The book remained like a shield between them. He glanced at the title. "Byron?" "Yes," she murmured, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. "I know it's not proper reading for whom?" he interrupted, genuinely curious. "You're an adult, Miss Carmichael." "You don't need my approval to read whatever you wish." She looked at him, startled. As if no one had ever said such words to her before. As if freedom itself was a language she didn't yet speak. "I'm not—" she began, then stopped. Breathed in slowly. "I'm not used to that." "To what?" "To not needing permission to exist." The words fell between them like glass shattering. Damien felt anger. Not at her, but at whoever had taught her to live that way. At Halford, at whoever had dimmed her light until she became a shadow. "Here," he said, his voice firmer than intended. "You exist without asking permission. Understood?" Isabel held his gaze. And for the first time, Damien saw something more than fear or caution. He saw gratitude and something else, something that made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in years. Trust. Chapter 5. The Bond and the Fear. Isabel woke in the middle of the night, her heart racing. The nightmare was always the same, hands gripping her arm, a voice whispering vile promises, doors slamming shut with no escape. She sat upright, breath uneven, the sheets damp with cold sweat. "I'm not there. I'm at Wintermere." But fear never listened to reason. Fear lived in the skin, in the bones, in the part of you that still ran, even when there was nowhere left to run. She rose, wrapped her robe tightly around her, and walked to the window. The moonlight washed the gardens below in liquid silver. Everything was quiet, still, safe. And then she heard it. Music. A piano, coming from somewhere downstairs. Isabel hesitated. It was long past midnight. She should go back to bed, pretend she hadn't heard it. Stay invisible, as she had learned to be. But the music was too beautiful, too sad. And something in it called to her like a siren's song. She descended the stairs barefoot, following the sound through corridors lit only by trembling candlelight. With every step, the melody grew clearer, low, heavy notes that spoke of loss more than melody. The door to the music room was slightly ajar. Through the narrow opening, she saw him. Damien sat at the piano, still in his shirt from earlier, his waistcoat and jacket discarded. The sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, and in the golden light she saw, for the first time, the scars on his forearms, thin lines, some deeper, silent witnesses of battles he never spoke about. He played with his eyes closed, and Isabel realized this wasn't a performance. It was a confession. Pain turned into sound. He doesn't sleep either, she thought. He has ghosts too. She pushed the door gently and the soft creak made him stop mid-note. He turned. For a second, pure surprise crossed his face, before the calm mask returned. "Miss Carmichael," he said, rising. "Forgive me. I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," she answered quietly, stepping closer. "I was already awake." He studied her in silence. He saw, she was sure, the shadows under her eyes, the loose hair, the way she hugged her arms as if holding herself together. "Nightmares?" he asked softly. She nodded. There was no use lying, not to someone who clearly had them too. He gestured toward the piano bench. "Sit with me?" It was a strange invitation, intimate in a way that made her pulse quicken. She should have refused, returned to her room, kept her distance, but she sat. The bench was too narrow for two. Their shoulders almost touched, and Isabel could feel his warmth, smell the faint trace of tobacco and wood, something that belonged entirely to Damien Hargrave. He placed his hands on the keys again but didn't play. He just let them rest there, as if drawing courage from the cool ivory. "My sister used to play," he said finally. "Catherine. She died 3 years ago." Isabel turned toward him. There was pain in his profile, not the loud kind, but the kind that lives quietly under the skin. "She was the one you couldn't save," she said gently. It wasn't a question. It was understanding. He closed his eyes. "She was 10 years younger. I was all she had after our parents died. And his voice faltered. "I let her go to London alone. I told myself the estate needed me, that she'd be safe with our aunt, Lord Halford," Isabel whispered. The name tasted like poison. He nodded, his jaw tightening. He courted her, promised marriage, and when she refused him, a pause, a deep breath. He ruined her, spread rumors, destroyed her name. Catherine couldn't bear the shame. That winter she fell ill, and simply stopped fighting. Tears blurred Isabel's vision, not only for Catherine, but because she understood. "Too well. Halford did the same to me," she said, voice distant. "He promised marriage. When I discovered what he truly wanted and refused him, he ruined my name. My family cast me out. I had no one." Damien's hand moved before he thought, covering hers where it trembled in her lap. "It wasn't planned. It was instinct." She looked down. Her hand, small and pale. His, large and scarred. Together, they fit. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice rough. "And Halford will never touch you again." "I swear it." She met his gaze. What she saw there frightened and comforted her at once. Determination, yes, but something else. Something dangerous. Something that made her heart beat faster for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "Careful," she warned herself. "This man can protect you, but he can also break you in ways Halford never could, because Damien Hargrave was not cruel. He was good, and giving your heart to someone good was infinitely more dangerous." She withdrew her hand slowly, not sharply, just enough to breathe. "Thank you for telling me about Catherine," she whispered. "Thank you for listening," he replied. And there, In the golden silence of the music room, between shared ghosts and mirrored wounds, something shifted. Isabel felt fear. Not of Damien, but of herself, of how her heart had already begun to forget that this marriage had an expiration date. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point. The letter arrived 3 weeks after Isabel had come to Wintermere. Damien stood by the window of his study, reading it again, each line colder than the last. The handwriting of his investigator, Mr. Thomas Whitley, was neat, disciplined, and carried exactly the kind of news Damien had been dreading. Your Grace, Lord Victor Halford has been making discreet inquiries about the whereabouts of Miss Carmichael. He has visited Harrington's auction house 3 times in the past week. The auctioneer has kept his silence as instructed, but Halford is not a man who gives up easily. He knows she has vanished, and he intends to find her. Damien crushed the letter in his fist, his jaw tightening. Of course he does. Men like Halford never leave witnesses. They never let go of the women who dared to refuse them. He crossed to his desk, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a thick dossier, the result of weeks of private investigation that had begun the moment he first heard Isabel Carmichael's name. It had been by accident. A casual conversation at his club, where someone had mentioned the scandal surrounding the Carmichael family. Poor girl. Halford courted her for months, promised marriage, and when she refused his indecent proposals, he destroyed not only her reputation but her entire family. The name Halford had frozen Damien in place. That same night, he'd hired Whitley, and when the report arrived, it had been darker than he'd imagined. He opened the file, scanning the pages he already knew by heart. Isabel Carmichael, 24, daughter of James Carmichael, successful textile merchant. Respectable family, no title. In 1839, at 21, Isabel met Lord Victor Halford at a charity ball. He courted her publicly for 6 months. Witnesses report repeated pressure for physical intimacy before marriage. Isabel refused, insisting on waiting until the wedding. When she discovered, through an intercepted letter, that Halford was simultaneously courting another heiress with a larger fortune, she confronted him. He denied it. She ended the unofficial engagement. 2 weeks later, rumors began to spread that Isabel had given herself to Halford out of wedlock, that she was tainted, that her family hid the shame. None of it was true. But society does not care for truth. Damien turned the page, anger rising like bile. Her father publicly defended her honor and challenged Halford. Halford sued him for defamation. During the trial, witnesses appeared, all bought, claiming to have seen Isabel in compromising situations. The father lost the case and most of his fortune in legal costs. James Carmichael died 6 months later, officially of fever, though physicians whispered it was heartbreak. The mother blamed Isabel for the ruin and for her husband's death. She disowned her publicly. Isabel was left without family, dowry, or reputation. And then, the line that had sealed Damien's decision. The same pattern of behavior was observed 3 years earlier with Lady Catherine Hargrave. The same promises. The same coercion. The same ruin when she refused him. The difference, Catherine had no brother in town to protect her when the rumors began. Damien shut the file sharply. His hands trembled. Halford had destroyed Catherine. And now he was hunting Isabel, to finish what he had started. To silence her. Or perhaps simply to punish the only woman who had escaped him? But she hasn't escaped yet, Damien thought grimly. Not while he's still looking. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. The butler stepped in, bowing slightly. Your Grace, the Duchess is in the gardens. She asks if you would join her for tea. Damien glanced through the window. There she was, sitting on the stone bench among the roses, a book resting in her lap, the afternoon sun turning her dark hair almost copper. She looked peaceful, almost happy, and he was about to destroy that, because the truth was cruel. The closer she stayed to him, the more danger she was in. If Halford discovered that Isabel Carmichael was under the protection of Damien Hargrave, the brother of the woman he had driven to death, he wouldn't retreat. He would escalate. Men like Halford were not intimidated by titles. They were provoked by them. "Tell the Duchess I'm occupied," Damien said quietly, turning back to his desk, "and that I'll be occupied for the next few days." The butler hesitated. "Sir?" "Just deliver the message." When the door closed, Damien turned once more toward the window. He saw the butler deliver the note. Saw Isabel look up toward his window, though she couldn't see him standing there, hidden by shadow. Saw her lower her head, close her book, and rise slowly before walking back inside. And in that instant, Damien knew he had just hurt her. But it had to be done. Distance was necessary. Because if he let himself get any closer, if he let the bond between them deepen, he would never be able to do what might soon be required. Send her away. Far away. Somewhere Halford would never find her, even if it meant never seeing her again. 11 months, he reminded himself. 11 months and she'll be free. Safe. Wealthy. And far from me. It was what was best for her. So why did it feel like the worst decision of his life? Chapter 7. The Choice and the Return. 5 days. 5 long days since Damien had begun avoiding her, and Isabel could no longer pretend it didn't hurt. She had tried to reason with herself. He's a duke. He has duties. He owes me nothing. But logic couldn't explain the silence that had fallen over Wintermere. Meals arrived at her door. The gardens were empty when she walked them. And at night, there was no music, no piano, only absence. It was as if he had turned into a ghost haunting his own house. And Isabel had begun to wonder if it was her fault. Did I say something wrong? Did I do something improper? Does he regret bringing me here? Worse, am I a burden he no longer wishes to bear? The thought consumed her. Because somewhere between safety and gratitude, Isabel had begun to care. Not just for the protection of the Hargrave name, but for the man behind it. For Damien, for the way he looked at her, as if she were someone worth seeing, for the quiet kindness in his hands, for the sorrow he carried, a sorrow that mirrored her own, and now he was gone, even while standing in the same house. And she couldn't stand it anymore. On the 6th day, she went to him. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears as she stopped before the study door. She raised her hand, hesitated, nearly turned back. "No, not again. I won't run from silence anymore." She knocked. "Come in," came his voice, tired, low. Isabel opened the door. The room was dim, lit only by firelight and a single candle. Damien sat behind the desk, still dressed, though disheveled. His waistcoat unbuttoned, tie loose, hair slightly unruly as if he'd run his hands through it 100 times. When he looked up, surprise flickered across his face. "Isabel!" He rose quickly. "It's late. You should be— Why are you avoiding me?" The question burst out before she could stop it. He froze. "I'm not— You are!" she cut in, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "Not angry, just needing truth. For 5 days you haven't dined with me. Haven't walked in the gardens. Haven't—" Her voice faltered. "Haven't played the piano." Damien turned his gaze away. "I've been occupied with estate matters." Liar. He turned back sharply, startled by her boldness. Isabel took a trembling breath and moved closer. "If I've done something wrong, if I've offended you in any way, please tell me. If you regret bringing me here, I can—" She swallowed hard. "I can leave. The contract says 1 year, but if I'm an inconvenience, stop," he said, and there was pain in his voice. "Isabel, stop." He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides. He stood so close she had to lift her chin to meet his eyes. What she saw there undid her completely. Not regret. Torment. "You are not a burden," he said quietly, voice rough. "You never were. Then why—" "Because you're in danger," he cut in. "Halford is looking for you. And the closer you are to me, the more exposed you become. I thought if I kept my distance— If I didn't—" He exhaled, closing his eyes. "I thought it would be easier to protect you if I didn't care so damn much." Her heart stumbled. Care? He opened his eyes, and what she saw there stole her breath. I'm failing, Isabel. Failing miserably to keep the distance I promised. Because you? A bitter laugh escaped him. You make me want to break every line of that damned contract. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Only feel. His nearness, his warmth, the scent of wood and smoke that clung to him. I don't want distance, she whispered, and saying it aloud made it real. I want to understand. I want to know what's happening. I want to know why Halford is so determined to find me. Damien studied her for a long moment. Are you certain? Because once I tell you, there's no one knowing it. I'm certain. He nodded slowly, then gestured toward the armchairs by the fire. Then sit, and I'll tell you everything. For the first time in days, the silence between them wasn't cold. It was waiting. I hired an investigator, Damien began. 3 weeks ago, when I first heard your name, before the auction, I needed to be sure. I needed to know if you were who I suspected. And who did you suspect? Another victim of Victor Halford, he said, and her name trembled inside his anger. The same man who destroyed my sister, and so he told her. About Catherine. About the rumors. About how she had withered under the weight of shame until there was nothing left. He told her about the report, how Halford's pattern was always the same: seduce, pressure, destroy. He did the same to you, Damien said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. Courted you for 6 months. Pressured for intimacy. When you discovered he was courting another heiress, you confronted him, and he ruined you. Your father, your family. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she held them back. My father died defending my honor. My mother blamed me, said I should have yielded to Halford to save our name. She was wrong, Damien said firmly. Completely wrong. But society doesn't think so, Isabel whispered. To them, a woman who refuses is proud. A woman who fights back is a scandal. Halford knew that and used it. And now he's hunting you, Damien said. Because you're the only one who escaped. The only living proof of what he is. If he finds me, he'll finish what he started. The fire cracked between them. Isabel stared into it, absorbing the truth. Then she looked back at him, not seeing pity, but fury. Not for her. For Catherine. For all of them. So you bought me to protect me, she said softly. To give me what you couldn't give Catherine. Yes, he admitted. And no, because now... His gaze met hers. Now it isn't just about redemption. It's about you, her heartbeat was wild. Your Grace. Damien, he corrected gently. You're my wife. By contract, perhaps, but still. You can call me by my name. Damien, she repeated, and it sounded intimate in her mouth. Dangerous. I don't want distance either. He closed his eyes as if her words hurt. Isabel, you don't understand. If I let myself... If we... 10.5 months, she interrupted. That's what's left of our contract. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for honesty. For presence. I'm asking you not to vanish again. He looked at her, and she saw it. The same war she was fighting. The fear of feeling. The fear of losing. The fear that 10 months might be too little. Or far too much. I won't disappear, he said at last. But Isabel, whatever this is between us, it's dangerous. I know, she whispered. And still, the firelight flickered between them. And there, in that fragile space of truth and risk, Isabel understood. It was no longer about surviving. It was about living, and for the first time in years she wanted to live with this man. Chapter 7. The Choice and the Return. 5 days. 5 long days since Damien had begun avoiding her, and Isabel could no longer pretend it didn't hurt. She had tried to reason with herself. He's a duke. He has duties. He owes me nothing. But logic couldn't explain the silence that had fallen over Wintermere. Meals arrived at her door. The gardens were empty when she walked them. And at night, there was no music, no piano, only absence. It was as if he had turned into a ghost haunting his own house. and Isabel had begun to wonder if it was her fault. Did I say something wrong? Did I do something improper? Does he regret bringing me here? Worse, am I a burden he no longer wishes to bear? The thought consumed her. Because somewhere between safety and gratitude, Isabel had begun to care. Not just for the protection of the Hargrave name, but for the man behind it. For Damien, for the way he looked at her, as if she were someone worth seeing, for the quiet kindness in his hands, for the sorrow he carried, a sorrow that mirrored her own, and now he was gone, even while standing in the same house. And she couldn't stand it anymore. On the 6th day, she went to him. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears as she stopped before the study door. She raised her hand, hesitated, nearly turned back. No, not again. I won't run from silence anymore. She knocked. Come in, came his voice, tired, low. Isabel opened the door. The room was dim, lit only by firelight and a single candle. Damien sat behind the desk, still dressed, though disheveled, his waistcoat unbuttoned, tie loose, hair slightly unruly as if he'd run his hands through it 100 times. When he looked up, surprise flickered across his face. Isabel! He rose quickly. It's late. You should be— Why are you avoiding me? The question burst out before she could stop it. He froze. I'm not— You are! She cut in, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. Not angry, just needing truth. For 5 days you haven't dined with me. Haven't walked in the gardens. Haven't— Her voice faltered. Haven't played the piano. Damien turned his gaze away. I've been occupied with estate matters. Liar. He turned back sharply, startled by her boldness. Isabel took a trembling breath and moved closer. If I've done something wrong, if I've offended you in any way, please tell me. If you regret bringing me here, I can— She swallowed hard. I can leave. The contract says 1 year, but if I'm an inconvenience, stop, he said. And there was pain in his voice. Isabel, stop. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides. He stood so close she had to lift her chin to meet his eyes. What she saw there undid her completely. Not regret. Torment. You are not a burden, he said quietly, voice rough. You never were. Then why? Because you're in danger, he cut in. Halford is looking for you. And the closer you are to me, the more exposed you become. I thought if I kept my distance— If I didn't— He exhaled, closing his eyes. I thought it would be easier to protect you if I didn't care so damn much. Her heart stumbled. Care? He opened his eyes, and what she saw there stole her breath. I'm failing, Isabel. Failing miserably to keep the distance I promised. Because you— A bitter laugh escaped him. You make me want to break every line of that damned contract. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Only feel. His nearness, his warmth, the scent of wood and smoke that clung to him. I don't want distance, she whispered, and saying it aloud made it real. I want to understand. I want to know what's happening. I want to know why Halford is so determined to find me. Damien studied her for a long moment. Are you certain? Because once I tell you, there's no unknowing it. I'm certain. He nodded slowly, then gestured toward the armchairs by the fire. Then sit, and I'll tell you everything. For the first time in days, the silence between them wasn't cold. It was waiting. I hired an investigator, Damien began. 3 weeks ago, when I first heard your name, before the auction, I needed to be sure. I needed to know if you were who I suspected. And who did you suspect? Another victim of Victor Halford, he said, and her name trembled inside his anger. The same man who destroyed my sister, and so he told her. About Catherine. About the rumors. About how she had withered under the weight of shame until there was nothing left. He told her about the report, how Halford's pattern was always the same: seduce, pressure, destroy. He did the same to you, Damien said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. Courted you for 6 months. Pressured for intimacy. When you discovered he was courting another heiress, you confronted him, and he ruined you. Your father, your family, Tears burned behind her eyes, but she held them back. My father died defending my honor. My mother blamed me, said I should have yielded to Halford to save our name. She was wrong, Damien said firmly. Completely wrong. But society doesn't think so, Isabel whispered. To them, a woman who refuses is proud. A woman who fights back is a scandal. Halford knew that and used it. And now he's hunting you, Damien said. Because you're the only one who escaped. The only living proof of what he is. If he finds me, he'll finish what he started. The fire cracked between them. Isabel stared into it, absorbing the truth. Then she looked back at him, not seeing pity, but fury. Not for her. For Catherine. For all of them. So you bought me to protect me, she said softly. To give me what you couldn't give Catherine. Yes, he admitted. And no, because now... His gaze met hers. Now it isn't just about redemption. It's about you. Her heartbeat was wild. Your Grace. Damien, he corrected gently. You're my wife. By contract, perhaps, but still. You can call me by my name. Damien, she repeated, and it sounded intimate in her mouth. Dangerous. I don't want distance either. He closed his eyes as if her words hurt. Isabel, you don't understand. If I let myself... If we... 10.5 months, she interrupted. That's what's left of our contract. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for honesty. For presence. I'm asking you not to vanish again. He looked at her, and she saw it. The same war she was fighting. The fear of feeling. The fear of losing. The fear that 10 months might be too little. Or far too much. I won't disappear, he said at last. But Isabel, whatever this is between us, it's dangerous. I know, she whispered. And still, the firelight flickered between them. And there, in that fragile space of truth and risk, Isabel understood. It was no longer about surviving. It was about living, and for the first time in years she wanted to live with this man. Chapter 8. Redemption and Light. 3 weeks had passed since the study, and Damien finally remembered what it meant to live. Not endure, live. And the most terrifying truth of all, she was the reason. Isabel, with smiles that came more easily each day, with soil under her nails, coaxing dead gardens back to bloom, with the unthinking bite to her lower lip when a line on the page refused to yield, with that quiet flare of light in her face whenever he entered a room, as if his presence mattered. As if he mattered. Dangerous, this feeling. He knew the signs, the excuses to cross her path, the hollowness of evenings when she retired early, the way her laughter reverberated through Wintermere and struck him like an arrow he welcomed. He was falling. No, he had fallen. And the fall frightened him more than any campaign, because battles end. Isabel could undo him in ways steel never could. And still he could not stay away. He found her in the garden at morning. A simple cream muslin, hair turned to dark silk by sunlight. On her knees among the roses, pulling weeds with bare hands. Not a duchess, a woman rebuilding what had been left to die. Herself. Both of them. Isabel, she turned. The smile that rose to greet him tightened something in his chest. Damien, look. She pointed to the beds. Mrs. Beatrice swears if I tend them now, they'll bloom again come spring. Spring. 6 months. Time, for once, on their side. You have a talent for bringing things back to life. I learned from someone, she said, standing, brushing soil from her apron. Someone who brought me back when I'd already given up. What moved between them needed no words. Come, he said, offering his hand. There's something I want to show you. In the library, he stopped before a portrait. His parents, himself, and a laughing girl, Catherine, painted 6 months before the accident. I was 21 serving with the regiment, he said softly. Catherine was 11. You inherited a dukedom from a distant uncle. None of us expected it. That's why I chose the army, the road for men with no fortune and no title in sight. When our parents died, I left the regiment to raise her. We lived modestly. Years later, the uncle died and... His hand took in Wintermere. All of this fell to me. Title, wealth, duty. And I learned I had no idea how to protect her in drawing rooms where words cut deeper than blades. Against men like Halford, I was unarmed. Isabel touched his arm. Simple, steadying. And now? Now I know there's more than one way to fight. Sometimes the greatest courage, he said, meeting her eyes, is to let yourself live in spite of the scars. You taught me that, she whispered. That I get to take up space. That I don't have to disappear to survive. And you taught me, he turned fully to her, that there's still light after dark. That I can still... The words stalled. His eyes finished them. Damien, when this began, I only wanted to survive. Now, his voice was rough. Now I want to live. This. With you. Not because I fear Halford. Not because I need protection. Because when I look at you, I see someone who understands. Someone with the same marks. Someone who loves you, he said. The confession edged like a blade that frees. This was meant to be simple. 1 year, protection, compensation. But you became the reason I wake. The reason this house feels like home again. Tears lit her gaze. 10 months, she breathed. To hell with the contract. 10 months, 10 years, a lifetime, I don't care. Now that I've found you, I won't let go. Even with my name in tatters? Your name is Hargrave now, he said, iron in his tone. And anyone who questions it answers to me. Not as a duke, as the soldier I was. A man who learned to fight for what matters. She laughed wetly. So you'd fight for me? I would bring down kingdoms for you. No drama, only truth. Her fingers rose to his cheek. Then kiss me. Prove this is real. He didn't need asking twice. The kiss wasn't hesitation. It was a vow. Recognition. 2 broken souls choosing to heal together. When they parted, breathless, he rested his forehead to hers. I love you, he murmured. Madness or not. It began as duty. Now it's only you. I love you too, she said. And it sounded like absolution. Urgent knocking shattered the miracle. The butler pale at the door. Your Grace. Lord Victor Halford waits in the hall. He demands an audience. He says he won't leave until he speaks with the Duchess. The world froze. Isabel went white as marble. Damien felt the old cold fury, the one that comes before battle. Is he alone? Yes, sir. He insists he has rights. He has none. Damien took Isabel's face in his hands. Look at me. Fear burned in her eyes, and courage with it. You don't have to see him, he said. I can send him away. No, I ran for 3 years. I won't run now. He wants to see me? Then let him see what's left of the woman he tried to break. Isabel, not alone. Never again. He pulled her into a fierce embrace. Always. They parted. He offered his arm. Then let's finish this, together. Epilogue. The grand hall of Wintermere had never felt so vast. Damien and Isabel descended the main staircase side by side, their fingers tightly entwined. Not out of fear, but defiance. Marble gleamed beneath the chandeliers, and in the center of it all stood Lord Victor Halford. He looked exactly as Isabel remembered, only worse. Blonde hair meticulously styled, a walking cane carved from ivory, clothes pressed to perfection. But the eyes, those same blue eyes still carried the same hunger, the same cruelty disguised as charm. Miss Carmichael, Halford greeted, as though the last 3 years had been a mere pause in conversation. What a pleasure to finally find you again. I searched for so long. Duchess of Wintermere, Damien corrected, his voice like cold steel. You are in my house, Halford. You will address my wife properly. Something flickered in Halford's face. Surprise, then disdain. Wife? He laughed, though the sound was hollow. How convenient. And how very quick. Almost as if... He tilted his head mockingly. As if this marriage were less a union and more a rescue. Tell me, Hargrave, do you make a habit of buying desperate women at auctions? Damien's body tensed, but before he could speak, Isabel stepped forward. He didn't buy me, Lord Halford. He gave me a choice, something you never did. Halford's smile thinned. Choice? My dear, I offered you everything. A respectable name, status, protection, and you, in your childish arrogance, refused. You offered me shame disguised as honor, Isabel said, her voice steady now. You pressed me for intimacy before our engagement. When I discovered you were courting another woman at the same time, I confronted you. And you destroyed me. You destroyed my entire family. Halford's expression cracked. I gave you exactly what you deserved, he spat. Women like you need to learn your place. There are always consequences for disobedience, just as... His gaze drifted toward Damien. Just as your sister learned, Hargrave. Silence fell, sharp, suffocating. Damien released Isabel's hand and stepped down the last stair, his every movement slow, precise, predatory. Say that again, he whispered. Halford's lips curved into venom. Lady Catherine Hargrave. So sweet, so delicate, so fragile. She refused me too, you know. Thought she was better than me. Look where that led her, dead and forgotten, while I stand here untouched. Untouched? Damien's tone dropped to something lethal. You think you're untouched? I know I am, Halford sneered. Men like me always are. I have money, a title, influence. Women like your sister, like the Duchess of Wintermere, are disposable. Society always believes the man, Hargrave. Always. Not always, Damien said, his voice quiet, and far more dangerous for it. Not when the man in question is broke, in debt, and ruined. Halford blinked. What are you talking about? Damien began to circle him slowly, like a commander walking the perimeter of a defeated enemy. You think I didn't investigate? I know every filthy secret you've buried. 20,000 pounds in gambling debts. Your estate, mortgaged to the bone. And that wealthy bride you were pursuing, Lady Margaret Thornhill? She ended the engagement yesterday. The evidence of your indiscretions found its way to her father's desk. Color drained from Halford's face. You wouldn't dare. I not only dared, Damien cut in. I already did. He gestured sharply, and the butler entered carrying a heavy folder. 7 written testimonies, Damien continued, voice like a blade. Each one signed. Each one describing your pattern. The lies, the threats, the coercion. And every one of those women comes from families powerful enough to crush you in Parliament. They are ready to stand together. Ready to speak, Halford stumbled. You're bluffing. No one will believe hysterical women. They will, Damien said coldly, when the evidence comes from a duke. When investigators confirm it. When witnesses verify your extortion schemes. When your finances expose the families you blackmailed. They will believe me, Halford, because the alternative is to challenge me. He leaned closer, face to face. And I've spent years on battlefields learning exactly how to destroy men like you. The difference between us? I have honor. You don't. For the first time, Isabel saw it, fear in Halford's eyes. What do you want? He rasped. I want you out of my house, Damien said. I want you to never speak my wife's name again. Leave London. Go to that miserable estate of yours in Yorkshire. Live quietly. And perhaps, just perhaps, I won't hand these testimonies to the Crown. And if I refuse? Damien smiled, and the smile had no warmth. Then I'll destroy you, publicly, legally, utterly. You'll lose your name, your property, your freedom. There are laws against coercion and extortion, Halford, and I now own your sins on paper. The silence that followed was suffocating. Halford's gaze darted between Damien, Isabel, and the folder, and in that instant she saw it. The exact moment he understood. He had lost. Entirely. This isn't over, he said, though his voice was hollow now. Yes, Isabel answered, her voice steady as tempered steel. It is. You have no power over me. Not over Catherine. Not over any woman you tried to ruin. 'Cause now we tell the story. And the truth, Lord Halford, is that you're nothing but a small, cruel man who mistook destruction for power. Halford's eyes gleamed with tears of rage. He turned and limped toward the door, his cane striking the marble like thunder. At the threshold, he paused. "You'll regret this, Hargrave." "No," Damien said, drawing Isabel close. "The only thing I regret is not ending this 3 years ago. Now go. And if I ever see you within 50 miles of this estate again, there will be no warning. Only consequences." The door slammed shut, echoing through the hall like judgment. For a long while, they stood in silence, arms around each other, listening as Halford's carriage rolled away into the distance. Then Isabel began to tremble. "It's over," she whispered. "Truly over?" "It's over," Damien said, tightening his hold. "He won't return. And even if he does, I'll keep my promise." She lifted her face to him, tears shimmering, not of fear, but release. "You saved me." "No," he said softly, cupping her cheek. "You saved yourself. I only gave you the sword. The courage was always yours." Her lips curved through the tears. "Then we saved each other." "Yes," he whispered, resting his forehead against hers. "I believe we did." 2 months later. Spring had returned to Wintermere Hall. The roses were in bloom again. Isabel knelt in the garden, her garden now, fingers brushing the pink petals that had once been bare thorns. Mrs. Beatrice had been right. With patience and care, even the dead can bloom again. "I found you," Damien said behind her. She turned, smiling. He stood at the stone archway, arms crossed. That look in his eyes, the one she now knew by heart. Love. "You always find me," she teased. Rising and brushing her hands, he approached and pulled her into an embrace. "I have a question." "Another one?" She laughed. "You've had so many lately." "This one's different." He took her hands, suddenly serious. "Isabel Carmichael Hargrave? Our contract ends in 8 months. When it does, you'll receive the £37,000. You'll be free to go anywhere, do anything, be anyone." Her heart clenched. "Damien, but," he continued, vulnerability in his eyes, "I wondered if you'd consider something else. What if we tore that contract apart, canceled it, and married again, for real this time? No terms, no clauses, no expiration date, just us. Forever." Tears burned her eyes. "Are you proposing to me when I'm already your wife?" "I'm asking you to choose this," he said. "Choose me. Not for a year, for a life. And if you'd rather go, I'll understand. I'll give you the 37,000, a letter of reference, a home wherever you wish." She silenced him with a kiss. When they parted, both were smiling through tears. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times yes. "Let's burn that cursed contract." "I don't need it anymore. I don't need payment. I just need you." Damien laughed, light, relieved, free. "So it's official. You're my wife, truly?" "Forever," she said. "No deadlines." "No deadlines," he echoed, and kissed her again. That afternoon, in Wintermere's library, before the same fire that had once witnessed their first truth, they tore the contract into pieces, halves, then quarters, until nothing remained but ashes. The flames devoured every word that had once bound them, and as the embers rose, Isabel held Damien's hand and understood. Some promises must burn so that others can bloom. Years later, when people asked how they met, they always laughed and said, "He bought me at an auction for £40,000. And she taught me that some things are beyond price. And when they were asked what had become of Lord Halford, they only smiled and said, "Some men disappear when they're finally exposed to the light." Because the truth was simple. Sometimes love doesn't arrive as a promise, but as repair. And the heart, at last, learns to forgive the past.